All right, good evening, everyone. Pleased to welcome you all to a meeting of the Winchester Town Forum, taking place in the Walton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. The time's just gone 6:30. I'm Councillor Mark Reach, and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Meeting's being live streamed and recorded to the council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is on our website. Can everyone check their phones are on silent? I know. And in the unlikely event that we need to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound, as you might expect, and please follow all the instructions given by the team. Can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting, and I'll invite you forward when it's time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first thing is apologies.
I've received no apologies for absence, but I believe you've got a notification.
There's a couple of people who will be late. So Councillor Tippett Cooper said he will be running a little bit late, and Councillor Becker will also be a little bit late as well. Are there any disclosures of interest, please? Resounding silence. Councillor Todd, I thought you might want to make one.
I need to declare a personal, non-prejudicial interest since I'm also a member of the County Council.
Very good, thank you. That's noted. We'll now move to number 3, which is any announcements. Well, first I'd just like to welcome County Councillor Dom Hiscock. Thank you for coming along. It's the second time running, so that's excellent. I would like to talk briefly about Christmas. We've got Sarah Davis from the BID who's going to talk to us a bit later on about some other things going on in the city centre. But Christmas was a resounding success. It was fantastic. It was great to see. And we already have some discussions about Christmas 2024 because it's just around the corner. Because while those lessons have learned fresh in our mind from how last year's Christmas went, I think there are some things we can do to make sure that next year's Christmas market and associated events are even more of a success than this year's were. So with that in mind, I think through the year we'll be having doing a little bit of planning, trying to bring together some interested parties around next year's Christmas in Winchester. Never too early to start thinking about Christmas. Just over 11 months out. Minutes of the previous meeting. So if you move to pages 5 to 10 in your agenda, are there any comments on those, please? Tremendous. So I'll take those as read. Can we agree that they are an accurate representation of last meeting? Great. So we've now got public participation. Now I think Mr. Tate, I'd like to welcome you as well. I think you'd like to speak after Sarah, is that correct? Which is agenda item number 6. So we will move straight to Sarah Davis from the Winchester BID, who's here to talk to us about bins. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm the BID manager for the city. I'm interested in bins and I'm interested in waste, and that's a really sad admission to make, but only because I think we're getting a bit of a problem because of the amount that we have in the city. I've discussed with council officers and members of this group the problems that we've got regarding food outlets, particularly having more and more bins. Some of them have up to 9 in the city, and where we can store them. Now, I understand going forward, planning makes a consideration that each new business should have places where they can store their own bins, but of course we have a lot of historic food and drink places that have bins out there. At the moment, there are 112 places you can eat in the city centre, and they've all got bins, most of them more than one. And if you imagine if we put 3 more restaurants in to Debenhams, there's likely to be another at least 15 businesses, bins going somewhere in the city. So my real question here is where we store all these bins, how we can help with food waste, how we can help with glass waste, what's happening with the bottle deposit scheme, and will we need to find places to actually store glass for the numerous amounts of places that are going to have empty bottles. I understand that there's a bin store being built on Cossack Lane car park next week, which is absolutely fantastic news. But it's really just raising awareness of the situation and making sure that we don't have a city where on Friday afternoons at 3 o'clock, there are bin bags everywhere, there are bins everywhere, just waiting to be collected.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for coming along this evening. It is an issue that's been raised a number of times by residents and others. Of course, it's a problem caused by how successful our city is and how successful we've been at attracting new food businesses in particular. I know it's a piece of work which many councillors have close to their heart, and I think particularly Councillor Edwards, I know you've done a lot of work around bins and the storage of waste in the city centre. So with that in mind, could I open up to any questions? I wonder whether Councillor Edwards, you would like to say a few words, or if there's any questions, I'm sure Sarah would be happy to take them.
Thank you, Chair. I think, first of all, I have to report a further aspect of the problem and correct an announcement which I made back in September to this meeting, which was that the council planned to create a new bin store or screening for bins in the land behind Godbegot House and George's Street. And as I'm sure many of all of us know, that has not proved technically feasible, but it just indicates, I think, how very challenging the situation is in the city. And all councillors, I'm sure, particularly St Michael's, but the adjoining wards will receive regular problems, not just from residents, but also from businesses, because I understand that your members are, for the most part, just as frustrated as anybody else of not being able to offer a better quality environment. I suppose one question I would have for you is, what appetite do you think there is amongst the city businesses for a more, how shall we say, a fundamental change to the way in which waste, retail eatery waste is collected?
Make an interesting point, Councillor Edwards. And truth to tell, most of the appetite will come from non-food businesses, because they're the businesses who find the food waste outside of their shops, waiting for argument's sake, the collection from Biffa. I think there's a definite appetite to keep the high street as free as possible from this clutter. And what drives me a little bit crazy is the Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock when everybody just puts all their rubbish out. Bear in mind, Friday nights are a busy night. We don't want our visitors, we don't want our students, we don't want our staff, we don't want our employees out amongst the rubbish on those. I think there will be an appetite for a solution, but very often we deliver the solution and nobody notices until it's not a problem anymore. But yeah, there will be interest, most definitely.
Are there any further questions for Sarah? Councillor Todd?
Yeah, this is quite a complicated situation, isn't it? Because Hampshire is, in theory, has some powers to deal with people who are obstructing the highway. The city council has powers that relate to environmental health, and has also been providing bin stores. There's been a change in that a change of use from a shop to a food business in the past required planning permission, which could look at whether people had adequate bin storage available as part of that decision, and that power has been taken away. What do you think, what can the bid do to encourage the businesses? I mean, we did at one point have a system where, in essence, the bid would have a conversation with the business to encourage them to manage their waste better. The city council was providing places to store bins so that they could actually manage it better. And then we had a backstop with the county, where they would intervene if people were not reacting. I mean, do we need to, would that work now? How are your conversations with businesses going, where you go and speak on behalf of the massive businesses and say, look, you're dumping your stuff in the square and there's a whole bunch of other businesses that don't like it? How is that conversation going at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Todd. We have a lot of these conversations, again, usually on a Friday afternoon. Those conversations go well in so much as we come to the party to try and find solutions. So I will talk to them about food waste. Are they buying too much food? Are they not selling small enough portions so they don't have food waste? Are they putting their food waste at the end of the day on something like Too Good To Go so that it's being sold anyway so that they don't have food waste? We look at reducing their number of bins. So if they've got 9, why have they got 9? What's happening? Are they not having them collected and emptied enough? Do they need a more regular collection? Is it a case that they're working with too many suppliers, and maybe we could streamline it and say, right, okay, if the majority of you work with Biffa, maybe we've got a better offering. You know, the bid is very reactive. So if somebody phones us and says we've got a problem, we go out and see them. So on a Friday afternoon, I'm back to Friday afternoons because that's our main problem point. We will go out and we will say to the businesses, why are your bins going out today? Now, it could be that they're closing early and there's nobody there to put them out at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's often the case. But what I don't want, and what we saw over Christmas, coming back in the new year, lots and lots of bin bags outside Starbucks and places whereby they either hadn't got the message or their collections hadn't been rearranged and they didn't know that maybe it was time to keep their bins inside for a bit longer until the collection came around. It's an education with them, really. It's making sure that they know where their bins should be, that they know once the bin's been emptied, they should take it back in, put it away. It's about making sure they, like I say, they don't have too much waste, so they don't have too much bins. If we're thinking about food waste, I really want to cut down on food waste because this is a big issue on so many levels. But again, if we can get them to sign up to these apps that get rid of food waste at the end of the day, that can make a huge difference too.
If you look at some other cities, so Manchester, for example, has put in place a public space protection order, which enables them to issue penalty notices to people who leave their businesses out too long. I mean, are we going to get to that point? What's the balance between carrot and stick that we need to have in order to get businesses to change?
I had the same conversation earlier about A-frames, but that's a whole other situation. Yeah, enforcement could be the answer. I think some form of financial enforcement has to be the answer. You don't go straight in at that, but if we say to them, right, you're allowed, for argument's sake, you're allowed 4 bins. You're allowed 2 waste bins, a cardboard and a recycling, for argument's sake, or a glass. You keep them in this place. They come out 2 hours, 3 hours before they are due to be emptied. They need to be taken away as soon as they are emptied. If you're not doing that, and if you're a persistent offender, let's call them that, then yeah, I think there should be some form of penalty.
Councillor Thompson.
And thank you. Yes, just following on from the discussion, clearly 9 bins is really unacceptable for one business to have. And, you know, we just don't have the space for 9 bins. And if they all decided they were going to have 9 bins, it would be absolute chaos. But what do you think, what are the levers that we can use as City Council to actually help with this problem? Have we got any answers to that? I don't know whether Andy's got any answers.
I hope Andy's got answers because I don't necessarily have. I think there's an education there. It could be told. It could be that the William Walker is part of Fuller's, and Fuller's always have 9 bins for each of their clubs. I don't see it at the Bishop and the Bridge. I don't see it at the Wickham Arms, but it could be that it's a corporate decision. I think it's more about educating them on let's recycle, let's repurpose, let's reuse, let's stop the waste. As to what you can bring to the party, I don't know. If we have bin stores around the city, can you charge for it? Can we do something like that whereby they're only allowed to put a certain number of bins in a bin store and they're paid an annual, or they pay an annual fee for that, small fee for that. And in return, they don't have to leave them out in the streets and they won't get penalised. We won't have to be fining them and enforcing it. But then we need the bin stores more than we've got. I'm hopeful Andy's got a solution.
I'm not sure I've got a complete solution, but we are working on it. I mean, we've got a new bin store going in Cossack Lane in the next few weeks. We haven't totally given up on the one at God Begot House. We're doing some archaeological work to see if that's possible. But businesses, you're right, they do have a lot of bins and they take a lot of the space, and we don't really understand why one business has so many more bins than another. But that's kind of a detailed discussion with that business to see if they can bring that number down. We do have a post, a street scene officer post, which was filled by Mark Hughes, who left us recently. Unfortunately, we're in the process of recruiting. And hopefully when we get someone back in that post, we can start to have some of these conversations with businesses. It's a lot of detailed work that requires a person on the ground to go and do that, really. And the other thing we're looking at, I mean, we haven't made any decisions about this yet, but in conjunction with environmental health, our environmental health team, we are looking at a possible charging scheme, a small charge to reflect the fact that we provide a space for bins in a bin store and we have to clean it and maintain it. We have to get members' approval for that, but that's what we're thinking. And then that might make people think about how many bins they've got. And the other thing I was just going to mention was about Debenhams, because that's a bigger property. They will have an internal bin store. The problem is with smaller businesses that are converting and don't require planning permission, and they don't have anywhere to put their bins, which is exacerbating the whole problem. But and other than that, we could work with Hampshire County Council. They can find people, but I'm not sure what good that's going to do. That's just going to hit business, and without us having a solution in place. So I think we need something more comprehensive, really, before going down that route. But that's just my view.
Councillor Learney.
Thank you, Chairman. Andy's mentioned a couple of the things I was going to say, but I think question for Sarah. We do have new food waste recycling requirements coming in over the next couple of years. For us as a council, it's 2026 we have to do it by, and that's a struggle for us to get everything ready in time, ordering new equipment and so on. Businesses have to do it a year earlier. Do you think they're actually prepared and even know what the requirements are going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Learney. No, I don't think they do. I don't think they do. Otherwise, they'd be doing something about it now, I would hope. But obviously, there's a campaign there that we actually need to raise awareness. And if we keep drawing attention to it, then hopefully they'll do something about it. But if it's a legal requirement, then they're going to have to do something about it. And if it's next year, yeah, we should be talking to them now about it.
Councillor Prest.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, how do we get the businesses of Winchester to feel a shared responsibility for what the city looks like? I asked this because, well, there was a much shared photo on social media over Christmas of the bottle store outside Waitrose, where everyone had left their excess bottles once the bins were full. I'm one of those people who goes for an early morning walk on Christmas Day in a slightly Grinch-like fashion. And the city was delightfully quiet. There were no cars, there were no people. But when I got to the back of God Begot House, the bins were full, and there were about 150 extra bags that had just been dumped there, presumably by the businesses who'd filled their bins and then dumped extra bags. And so I go back to my original question, which is, how do we foster? We're all here because we care. How do we foster in the people who run establishments in our city, who make money being in Winchester, who are part of BID, who are part of our broader community? How do we create in them a behaviour and a way of thinking about the city where they share some of that responsibility?
It's another good question, isn't it? We were talking earlier about how if somebody puts a bin somewhere, everybody thinks that's somewhere you put your bins, and then you get bin bags. And you find a lot with God Begot Houses residents as well, people who live around the area, because we've seen chairs and beds and all sorts dumped there. It's recognised as a dumping area, and that's not right. And in the same way that if you get a piece of graffiti on a wall, it will attract other graffiti. That's where we need to stop it. That's where we need to address it as soon as. The shared responsibility thing is about having pride in place. We're big fans of pride in place. I spend my life putting up hanging baskets and Christmas trees and Christmas lights and cleaning the streets and making sure the streets are safe, because I'm a great believer if the place is attractive, more people will want to come. And I think the businesses understand that, but it's about maybe reminding them of their responsibilities. And again, I can go out and I can talk to them till I'm blue in the face about, don't leave your bins out once they're empty. It takes a while. It's an education with them all.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. So the BID does an exceptionally good job for Winchester. We benefit from the Christmas lights and so forth like that. We are very appreciative of the bid's response with our businesses. Can you talk us through what sort of forum, when you actually want to discuss these elements of problems that arise with the rubbish and whatever? Is it the case that you just physically go out and visit them, or have you got an actual better sort of make-up forum where you can get this message out to them, maybe through Teams, Zoom, or a newsletter from BID or whatever? What's your forum? What's your communication with the businesses?
Thank you, Councillor Scott, all of the above. So we'd start by emailing them. We email them because that's an introduction to what we're going to be talking about. So that warms them up in the nicest possible way. Then we've got e-news that goes out every other week. So they're made aware of that. Then we've got the opportunity to go and visit them. There are 711 businesses in the area. So contact, but then we can pull them together. So I meet with the independent group every quarter. Well, that's 200 potential businesses there that you can get in a room together. I mail them every month. We've got a lot of methods of communication. Yeah. The most effective, of course, is going out and talking to them, getting that anecdotal evidence, getting that face-to-face evidence, but we'll communicate with them however works. And we do that for the council as well. If you've got issues that are going on here, we're quite happy to send those business communications out and go and talk to the businesses. But yeah, we should know them, we do know them, and we do go and talk to them. But yeah, any method of communication, people respond in different ways.
Yeah.
And something like the bins, everybody's got them. And truth to tell, everybody should have their business name written on them, so we know where they
are. Any further questions? Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. Do the many businesses in Winchester have separate arrangements for collection, or are there group arrangements for certain businesses? How does it actually work?
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. They do their own. So the nationals will probably have a national provider. So they might be with Veolia or whoever, and so everybody in that stream goes with Veolia. If you're a small indie, we will always recommend Biffa, because Biffa do so much in the city and they're here every day. So a lot of them will go with Biffa. But then you get people who are with South Waste Management. There are some odd ones, Lily Waste as well. I think most of it's based on price, understandably. But I would love to say to everybody, right, you all need to, in the nicest possible way, if we came together, I'm sure we could get much more effect.
Which was the reason I asked the question, really. Is there a financial angle to try to streamline the contracts that are in place and therefore have a common service and time and so on across the city?
Yeah, I imagine there'd be great advantages to it. But again, if we've got somebody like, who's a high waste, if we've got somebody like Starbucks, who are getting through a lot of paper cups and a lot of cardboard and a lot of possibly a lot of food waste, although they are signed up to Too Good to Go. If they're being told you've got to go with Veolia, it's very difficult to sway them that, well, the rest of the city's going with Biffa. Otherwise, I would love to introduce something citywide whereby we worked with Biffa or whoever to actually get some discounts, to get regular collections on a daily basis. I think that would definitely help.
Yeah, and I can understand there'd be tiers for different businesses and sizes, but certainly something worth thinking about to try and get some conformity. I'm aware of what goes on in Barcelona, for instance, where I've got a family that live. The city council effectively does the collection about 11 o'clock at night and goes around, and it's cleaned and it's washed, and all businesses have to use that service. It seems to work quite well.
Yeah, we'll do that. That sounds a perfect idea. Just the one-stop shop would be lovely, because everybody would know who was accountable and would know when their collection was being made. I'd love that. That would be great.
Councillor Becker.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. It's a combination of husband in London and sick children, or sick child. The other one's better. Following on from Councillor Westwood's question, for those smaller independents who may be negotiating their own contracts, is the bid in a position to help facilitate some discussions whereby they could group together and negotiate a better deal? Because obviously the amount of waste that they will create collectively will be greater than each of the contracts they'll be able to negotiate on an individual basis.
Thank you, Councillor Beckett. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea, especially in those areas where we have pockets of independent businesses, so St Thomas Street, the Square, Parchment Street. Yeah, I think we could do collective area things, and that's quite something I'm quite happy to consult them with. You know, there's no harm in me going out and asking them if I could make it easier, make it more effective, if we could, you know, find a solution by clubbing together. There's a lot of collaboration going on around a lot of stuff at the moment, project wise. So yeah, I think it's a good suggestion.
Now, I think Mr. Tate, you would like to come and speak as well. So you know the rules. Please assume the usual position. And I think it's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to address the Town Forum. As some people may know, this is an issue it's been very close to my heart and I've been involved in probably for in excess of 15 years. Many times I questioned why Zizzies were allowed to leave up to 15 trade waste bins permanently on the pavement in Hammond's Passage. It took until 2018 with the council's trade waste action plan to get the bins removed. The same thing happened in Parchment Street with WH Smith, and their bins were left out permanently. I tried to work out when Cat Brandwood came and spoke about it. It was a cabinet meeting in about 2012 or 13, which I prompted her to come along to. Interesting, Phase 8 used to leave their bins out there and bags of rubbish. They said they couldn't store them internally. When the guy set fire to them and the shop was completely gutted, they found space. Although matters have certainly improved since the action plan was introduced, I was looking at a picture I took on Sunday, the 13th of August this year. It was disgusting in the square, and that is the businesses, the Eclipse, the Orangery. It's their rubbish which is left there. It smells, it's disgusting. There is a term about what you shouldn't do in your backyard, and that's what they do. When Cop Brasserie applied for planning permission back in 2013, I used the planning process. I put an objection on there to say if they don't store their rubbish, and for the first 8 years, never was there a bin outside. 2 years ago, they started to slip. There's one out there, but sometimes there will be 6, 7, 8, 9. Shouldn't be there. The area asked Peter, Russell and Bromley, Rodney Locke, who was the senior estates officer here, he happened to bank with NatWest. So every time he came in, I said, Mr. Locke, the bins are going back out there. It was owned by the city council and he policed it. There were no bins there. So you could actually see St. Peter's Church, which is outlined behind there. Pret-a-Manger, when they applied for their planning permission in 2016, I raised the same issue. I said, you've got to store your rubbish internally. There will be Saturdays where it will be disgusting. Saturday afternoon, there is no excuse. I raised that issue. They assured the planning officer that they would always store their rubbish inside. Andy Murphy, sadly he's gone, Andy was brilliant. He would go into the businesses and he would have a gentle word with them, and it worked. The Caston block, I'll leave that alone. But what rubbish does, it gives us food waste for rats and pigeons, and that is another bugbear of mine. You go through into the square, the pigeon excrement is disgusting. It goes into Hammond's Passage. It's attention to detail. The planning process will work, but it's the diligence of officers and the bid, and I liaise with the bid on occasions. I better not say I've got frustrated, because I hope that they can go into the premises and say, take your bins inside, but they don't. So, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just think it needs a focus with certain officers in the bid just to ensure that it's not an open rubbish dump. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tate, and thank you, everyone. And I think that that was the record for a number of contributions and questions. And thank you very much, Sarah, for coming in. To sum up, I suspected this would be something that would have great interest for everyone, both amongst councillors representing residents and members of the public as well. It clearly has. And I can assure everyone around the table and Mr. Tate and anyone else who's listening that this is something that we are going to get resolved. It's something that we need to focus on. It is that attention to detail. It is making sure that Winchester is as good as it can be. There is clearly a sliding scale of things we can do. We've heard about that this evening, starting from communications and collaboration and working with our businesses right the way up to potential enforcement. Obviously, we don't want to get there. there are steps along the way which are probably where we're going to have to get to. But it's something that I'm really keen that we tackle, and I know everyone around this table is as well. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming down. Thank you everyone for your questions. I really do appreciate it. And this is the start of the conversation, not the end. So thank you. So moving on, so bins, of course, is very exciting. Even more exciting is the town account, item number 7 on the agenda. So if you turn page 11 to 20 in your agenda pack, and Mr. Kennedy, thank you for coming up to the table as well. So can I ask members if there are any questions on this paper? I'll get and who's going to introduce it? Would that be Councillor Lerney? Okay, Councillor Lerney, go first, and then questions to follow, please.
Very much, Chairman. The Winchester Town account is a special expense within the City Council budget, which pays for expenditure in the unparished area of the district. The 5 town wards minus Harestock, which is in Littleton and Harestock Parish Council. 3/4 of that expenditure is on recreation grounds, play areas and open spaces. We also pay for public transport provision, community safety, public toilets, grants to community organisations and cemeteries. With the majority of the spend connected to inflation-linked contracts, costs have increased considerably in the past few years. To balance the books, we have reviewed playground management, lowering capital spend and increasing reactive maintenance, and agreed to some grant reductions in future years. In the next year, cemeteries and open space management will be key areas for review, looking at efficiencies and savings. Outside the town precept, the town has only small sources of income: allotments, pitch, pavilion and court rental, cemetery charges, and for capital expenditure, the local portion of the community infrastructure levy. We do want, as a town forum, to provide great local recreation and public facilities, and we can demonstrate that looking at the new King George V Pavilion, the skate park, the work we've been doing in our parks and playgrounds, as well as the aspirations contained and strongly supported by the public in the River Park Park Plan and the One Great Win Vision for Winchester document. We want to continue to support the Greener Faster agenda, our vibrant local economy, and continue the Pride in Place work we're doing on our high street, in our local communities, and looking after our local heritage. To achieve what we want for our residents, we not only have to consider carefully our spending plans, but also unexpected expenditure and emergencies. In its Councillor Guide to Finance, the Department of Communities and Local Government, as it was then, recommended town and parish councils should hold between 25% and 100% of the annual budget in a general reserve. Currently, we have a 10% reserve, and the proposal for a 15% reserve takes us closer to that recommended level. As the town is backed up by City Council financial resources, the town does run less risk than a parish council would. However, it is still prudent to increase the level of reserves, which will mean looking at a precept increase of greater than the 3% that we show in the projections. For those of you looking at the appendix, you'll see that the projections show our reserves falling well under the 10% recommended, let alone what would be a desirable higher level of 15%. With that regard, and recognising that we already have identified areas of budget which may lead to increases and extra money needing to be found in the next year, when looking at the level of council tax precept of the town, I would propose, and I will formally recommend at an appropriate point, Chairman, that as we did last year, we ask Cabinet for the maximum increase allowed under the combined town and district referendum limit. I don't know if Mr. Kennedy wants to add anything to that.
Just for clarity for members on the table, Councillor Lerney, would you mind just setting out the process from here, because it is a bit convoluted, isn't it? So what happens next, please?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the town budget is actually part of the city council budget, but as a process, the council has felt that, or council itself has felt that it's appropriate that the town forum meets, looks at the budget and recommends what we believe the contents of the budget are and what the level of tax increase should be to Cabinet, which then goes forward to the council as a whole. So the process after this is that following our recommendation to Cabinet, Cabinet will look at our recommendation, take that forward in the budget, and that will go forward to council as a whole.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. This is the second or third time we've seen and we've talked about this and the proposals for the town account. And I give you a bit of a warning. So, are there any questions either for Councillor Lerney or Mr. Kennedy on this, please? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Across the nation at the moment in time, lots of councils feel under pressure with their finances. We seem to be holding okay, and obviously, yes, we are acting as if we're parish council propped up by the city council. How can we stay forward with providing all the vision that we want to do as a town forum moving forward? Because obviously we've heard of reduced playground maintenance, etc., but on the flip chart, we want to provide great recreation facilities, whatever. Is it a worrying picture moving forward, Mr. Kennedy, Councillor Lerney, about our finances? Because obviously, if we are a bit nervous about our reserves percentage as well, we are in a sound position at the moment in time, but we don't want to be like other councils in the nation at the moment in time under the cosh. So what's the foreseeable future in the next, I guess, 5 years moving forward to try and keep up with the vision of what we're trying to do? Thank you.
I think Mr. Kennedy may want to add to this. As a council, when we look at others, we do feel that we are in a much better financial position, but we do share the problems that are facing the entire public sector at the moment in terms of financial pressure. Inflation is high, it remains high, much higher than it has been in the past, and capping limits have been in place for many years, which have constrained our budget. It's quite instructive if you go back and look at parish and town council budgets in the district and how much they've risen over the past 10 to 15 years compared to that of the town forum, and that is a severe constraint on our expenditure. You know, particularly when we were going through periods of 0% council tax increases. We feel that the reviews we've done on playgrounds, the reviews we've got coming forward on cemeteries and open spaces will definitely help us manage our budget better. But it is going to be difficult going forward. I think there's no doubt about that. And that is partly why we're recommending that we have a look at having a higher level of reserves so that we do have a bit more financial resilience within the system for those unexpected expenditures, which to a degree in the past we've been able to deal with kind of within existing budgets on the whole, but we're going to reach a stage where our existing budgets are only just enough. So I don't know if you want to add to anything to that, Darren.
Thank you. I think that covers the majority of what I was going to say. Anyway, I'd probably just purely add in terms of one-off funding. Obviously, we have community infrastructure levy funding, and so that has been protected, particularly in terms of the play area refurbishment programme, which is funded from the town reserve and precept, and so therefore that funding does remain available for spend on new projects. So that's one additional source of funding. But obviously the town is limited in terms of one-off expenditure coming forward, and has a number of items like the park plan, etc., and ambitions where it would like to have that funding available in order to deliver on those items. And so therefore the town increasing the town reserve and being able to achieve a target of 15% also would help with that to a certain extent, where one-off projects do come forward. There'd obviously be slightly more funding available in order to meet those, and then obviously ensuring that that reserve is then topped up to the 15% again.
Councillor Prest.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard you say that this has been up in front of us 3 times already, that the horse may well have bolted on what I'm about to say, or indeed the spirit might have left the cold body. When I look at the forecasts, I'm just interested in a 20% uptick in cemeteries and a 40% downturn in grants and vision delivery. And I'm as big a fan of dead people as anybody probably in the room, but I'm more interested in people who are still with us and their capabilities and their potential. And I just wonder, you mentioned a review of the cemetery's costs, which may well answer the question that I'm asking, but what's the strategy behind the sort of more money on cemeteries, less money on grants?
The reality is that the management of our cemeteries is actually an aspect of our open space management. Really, you could quite easily roll it into that. Some of the cemeteries we manage are actually no longer used for fresh burials. So we are just managing them as, you know, public open spaces effectively. That is linked to, so the management of those is linked to contract inflation. However, we can have a look at how we manage those slightly differently, in terms of thinking about whether we can reduce, well, not necessarily reduce, but maybe manage better the maintenance. We've had quite good experiences with looking at turning some of our cemetery areas into wilder areas, you know, which obviously has advantage for, you know, our aspirations around nature recovery. The other thing that we will be looking at is those cemetery fees, which isn't necessarily about increasing them, but making sure that the income that we get in comes closer to meeting our annual costs. It could well be that actually by dropping the cost of our burials that we could find that we have more people coming to be buried, and we have been considering that, while obviously trying to make sure that we don't fill up our burial space too quickly. Going back to the grants and vision delivery, in a sense that is our discretionary spend. So this is money that we wish to spend, and I think Councillor Becker may want to say a few words about that. And ideally we'd like that to be bigger, and if we did have greater finances, I imagine that is the area that we would be looking to increase.
Yes, that is something that we actually topped up a few years ago to allow for the vision delivery. So it was almost artificially inflated for a little bit, so it's coming back to where it was. Darren, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes.
We are also, as a council, doing an overall review of the grants program that we run, making sure that we are using that money effectively, and the Town Forum grants program is part of that review as well, because we want to make sure that when we are giving away effectively taxpayer money, that we are doing so in a way that actually gives more effect back to residents than the actual funds that we're giving out. So that should be taking place the next financial year. So the effect of that will be, or the conclusions from that will be known when we come to do next year's budget, and we can look at the grants program again then.
Councillor Morris.
Thanks. Yes, as we know, Hampshire County Council is currently consulting on various cuts to things like street lighting and funding the Winchester Beacon. Do we anticipate any situations where the town forum might find itself having to make up the shortfall of these cut services, or in any ways in which the fact that Hampshire is cutting services will end up unexpectedly increasing our costs?
That is obviously being kept under review at an entire council level. Potentially it may have more of an impact on the district than the town, but as we become aware of any impacts, then obviously we'll draw those to the attention of the town forum. If they relate to the town forum, we'll have those discussions as they happen. I don't think we are aware of any right now, but obviously that's an ongoing process, so we'll keep that under review.
I think the only area I can think of which might be affected is some of the footway lightway we pay for, which may come under the PFI contract, but we do still have control over the levels of lighting in those areas. So even if they are covered by county, we wouldn't necessarily cut that lighting back in line with what county are doing.
And I guess a question from me as well, the announcement this week from the Secretary of State for levelling up housing in communities, around some maybe additional funding and support for councils. I understand it's still unclear, and we assume that the lion's share of that would go to the county, but then the district might get some, and the question would be whether there'd be any scraps left on the table for the town forum. Councillor Learning.
The leader might be able to confirm this, but my recollection of the letter was that the extra support was very much targeted at county and unitary authorities. I think it's very unlikely that any dregs will fall down as far as us, and I think county also aren't anticipating that extra funding will make any difference to their plans.
Yeah, we have had preliminary guidance at the county as a county councillor of the amount that they are likely to get. It will be helpful in 24-25, but it is not enough to cover the gap. They will still be required to take quite a large amount out of reserves, and they are still way off covering the budget deficit in 25-26, which is the year that they're most worried about. There was something about core spending power increasing, so this may be one where we need to understand the exact details of it. But certainly, even though the figure being talked about was large for the country as a whole, within the context of the social care budget and the amount that Hampshire received, it was still not that much. But we will be telling all councillors as soon as we have more clarity on the financial situation, and it will reflect into the budget planning process. In terms of how it is likely to affect the town forum, we shouldn't forget that there is a TC25 project which requires us to save a very large amount of money from our budget by 25-26, and so I think it would be unwise to assume that any new figures will automatically find its way through to the town forum. It's more likely to be used in the context of closing the gap that we know that we have to address in a couple of years' time. I don't know if Mr. Hendy has any further perspective, if there's anything he's heard that I haven't.
Thank you. I know the Section 151 office was previously doing calculations today to see if any of those additional sort of national funding would be coming down to the district. See, Darren's got his finger poised on the button there, so I know that there has been a calculation about whether we're in a position to sort of share that with you now, or whether actually we need to do a bit more work. I don't know, but there is the possibility of some more funding from the money for the district from that national allocation.
So just to add, obviously the town account itself doesn't receive any grant funding directly, so just to note that initially, but in terms of the government's funding announcement at a district level, that does impact us in terms of the 3% funding guarantee which we receive currently, and that's been increased to 4%, and also there's some additional rural service delivery grant. Overall, in the context of the grants that the council does receive, we're not expecting there to be a huge additional amount of funding available, and government haven't told us exactly how much that's likely to be yet as well, and it does involves some fairly complex calculations, so we will need to wait before we receive any final figures, but certainly in terms of estimations at the moment, it's not going to be a huge additional sum for us.
The risk for us is that the way that calculations work, it's possible that one number might go up and then another one somewhere else goes down. And so we will find out how much it is, but it's unlikely to be transformational, and will be something that needs to be looked at in the context of the of the plans that we have that are underway to make sure we remain financially sustainable in the future. We are in quite a different situation from Hampshire County Council. So Hampshire County Council is in a position where they have a very tough savings programme in place, and even with that, they run out of their available reserves within a relatively short period of time. They will just run out of cash potentially, or run out of the reserves, the general fund or the general reserves that they can use. We do not believe that we're in that position, and we're working to make sure that we don't get into that position. And we will judge what the impact is of any new government funding as we get more clarity.
Okay, thank you, everyone. If there are no further questions, is there any debate on this paper? That is a no. So if we turn to the recommendations on page 11, please, and I'll just read them out. So could I, recommendation number 1 is that the town forum agrees the draft budget for 24-25 and the indicative projections for the strategy period as shown at appendix 1. Is that agreed? Number 2 was that we approve an increase in the target minimum town reserve balance from 10% to 15% of annual net service expenditure. Is that agreed? Number 3 was that we approve an increase of £5,841 to the baseline town revenue budget from 24-25 in respect of increased reactive maintenance and annual life expectancy reports on play equipment. Is that agreed? And number 4, that we consider that the council tax precept for the town area, which it wishes to recommend to Cabinet, noting the requirements for the council to keep within the overall referendum requirements. Are we happy that we have considered that? We're happy. Can I hear that again? Councillor Learning.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to put in a recommendation that we recommend to Cabinet that the council precept for the town area be increased by the maximum allowed under the combined town and district referendum limit.
Thank you. So just to be clear, so we would be seeking agreement to the recommendation that we propose to Cabinet that we increase the precept by the maximum allowed under the referendum limit. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. Do we agree to that, please? Fantastic. Mr. Kennedy, I think you have everything you need. Excellent. Thank you very much. So this brings us on to agenda item number 8, which is updates from informal groups. Now, I know Councillor Tippett Cooper has an update to give from the Heritage Group, so I'll just pass over to you, Councillor, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I will be quick for various reasons. So it's all very good news from the Heritage Group. We had a meeting to discuss the projects the Heritage Group are liaising with officers about, and it's all very good news. So just to update the forum as to what's happening, at the previous meeting, I explained that works for Hyde Abbey Gateway and Buttercross were scheduled with the aim for it to come online, work to begin in the spring of this year. Pleased to say that is still the plan, is still the case. We have engaged as a council a heritage architect consultant to prepare plans for submission to Historic England for both schedule of monuments, the Buttercross and Hyde Abbey Gateway, and those should be submitted within the next 2 weeks, which is very good news, all being well. The process is then with Heritage Things to approve those works. So those works, what they look like for the Buttercross, it includes repairing of a damaged finial and sort of general kind of consolidation of the masonry across the monument, cleaning to remove the very deep moss and any pigeon waste. The Buttercross, I hasten to add, is cleaned very often, but it can only be cleaned with completely deionized water and with very light brushes because of the nature of and importance of ensuring that the monument isn't impacted. But this actual work will allow for more deeper cleaning, I should say. And thirdly, there'll be protection around things like pigeon proofing as well added to the Buttercross. So that's really good news. We'll see, I suppose, boots on the ground in terms of works around spring this year. And what that will mean, what the public will see is the Buttercross will be scaffolded for a time, and it may take around 3 months or so to complete the works. There'll be some information put up and around the scaffolding to explain what's going on, but that's the plan. So it's very good news and a real sign that this council takes the preservation of its heritage sites very seriously. It's similarly good news for the Hyde Abbey Gateway. Key elements of work there will be improving pigeon proofing there as well, replacing internal lighting, crucially resurfacing the floor of Hyde Abbey Gateway, the archway, and installing new signage and interpretation boards within that space. I'm hoping to speak with local heritage groups in the next few weeks to kind of get some sense of what information would be good to put on there, because there's some real local experts in our community. That'd be great to hear from about how we best provide that interpretation. Crucially, some repairs to the stonework in Hyde Abbey Gateway, because that is absolutely crucial, so it's protected and preserved for the next century and so forth. And the process of that is similar to the Buttercross. The application to Historic England will be going forward in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The works will start a bit later than the Buttercross, it's anticipated. So we're looking at sort of early summer start for those works. But that is all going ahead. Pleased to say that we've also asked Historic England for some approval for the temporary installation of a banner which the Friends of Hyde Abbey Gateway have sourced from the British Library, which is depicts the giving of the Golden Charter by King Edgar, which is linked to the history of Hyde Abbey, and that should be put on display hopefully within the chamber if Historic England have no objection to that as a temporary and pleasant interpretation feature. So that is all good as those 2 sites. There's a few other things, but I'm conscious that I'm probably taking up too much of your time for update, Chair. Those are the 2 primary projects, but I can explain more if you'd like me to. We'll leave it at that.
I think that's fine. I mean, we want more to talk about the next time as well. It's really good to hear progress on the Buttercross as well. It's also good to hear that we do clean it on a regular basis. It's just that we have to use, these incredibly soft brushes, which aren't really brushes, and deionized water, which I'm sure doesn't do a great deal. But thank you for that update. On the chairs for the other informal groups, are there any further updates? There's been a quiet period over Christmas, so no pressure. No. Very good. Well, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Tibbet Cooper. That's really good to hear. We move now to agenda item number 9, which is the work programme for 23-24, which I think is that on pages 21 and 22. Any comments, queries? No, very good. Just one item to call out on there. We will have an update from the Friends of St Giles Hill Park regarding preliminary works as well, currently scheduled in for June. So that's one to look forward to. I think, do we need to approve that, or is that okay? That's just for noting. Just for noting. Excellent. Well, I think with that, unless someone shouts, I think that concludes the business for today.